All right, so we're going to call this, I know we've called a couple of our lessons the same thing, but we'll call these more parallel lines. So we're in section 3.4. All right, so on the bottom left of your graphic organizer, you have a picture that looks like this. And we have, this is line L, this is line M, and this is line N. All right, guys, let's stop talking, please. And in the little box, it says L is parallel to M, and L is parallel to N. So we have, if we mark this, we would have L is parallel to M, and L is parallel to N. And actually I'm going to leave those marks off. That'll make it a little more confusing. Alright, so what I want to do is draw in. We want to see what we can figure out from this, so we're going to draw in a transversal. So if we draw in a transversal there, and we know that L and M are parallel. So what do we know about this angle and this angle if L and M are parallel? They are congruent because they are what kinds of angles? What was it? Alternate interior. These are alternate interior angles. Those are congruent. Well, L is parallel to N also. So I'm going to go down here to this angle. What do we know about this angle and this angle? If L is parallel to N. They're congruent. They're also congruent because this angle and this angle are what kind of angles? They're also alternate interior angles. All right, so let's see what we can figure out about line M and line N. What kinds of angles are these two? They're congruent. They're marked as congruent. But for line M and line N with this transversal, what do we call these angles? One's on the inside. One's on the outside? Yes. They're corresponding angles. Guys, let's stop the chatter, please. They're corresponding angles. If corresponding angles are congruent, what do we know about the lines? They are parallel. If corresponding angles are congruent, the lines are parallel. That's right above on your graphic organizer. So if line L is parallel to line M, and line L is parallel to line N, then line M is parallel to line N. And if we said this in words, I would suggest either putting that in the box or putting it to the side. If two lines are parallel to the same line, then they are parallel to each other. Kind of like a transitive property for parallel lines. Two lines are parallel to the same line, then they're parallel to each other. M and N are parallel, both parallel to line L, so M and N are parallel to each other. So that's our bottom left box on our graphic organizer. All right, questions there? All right, let's go over to the right. Over on the right, we have a drawing that looks like this. And this is on your graphic organizer. and this is M, and N, and L. And in the box it says L is perpendicular to M, and L is perpendicular to N. This upside down T means perpendicular. And perpendicular means what? They form what kind of angle? Right angle. How many degrees? 90. And that's what this little box means, right? 90-degree angles. So we could, if we wanted to, what do we know about all 90-degree angles? They are congruent. All 90-degree angles, all right angles are congruent, so we could mark these as congruent. All right, so we're going to do the same thing we did with the last one. Here are our two lines. Here's our transversal. What kind of angles are these? One inside, one outside. Corresponding angles are congruent. What does that tell us about the two lines? They are parallel. So if L is perpendicular to M, and L is perpendicular to N, M is parallel to N. And in words, we would say if two lines are perpendicular to the same line, then they are parallel to each other. So M and N are both perpendicular to line L. That means they're parallel to each other. Because these two are corresponding angles, we could also use this angle inside and say same side interior angle. They're supplementary because 90 plus 90 is 180. So lots of ways we could do that. But this guarantees us that line M and line N are parallel. All right, questions there? So nothing really different, nothing really new than what we done before with our parallel lines. Just kind of a little extension of how we're looking at it. All right, last thing I want to do is just a couple of examples using these ideas. All right, I want to draw a picture here. And we're going to label some information, and we want to see what we can figure out. So I'm going to call this A, B, C, D. And we're going to say this angle is 68 degrees. This angle is 22 degrees. This angle is 35 degrees. And this angle is 55 degrees. And what we want to know is how are segments AB and CD related. So we want to know something about this segment and this segment. So what can we figure out here? Yes. Not congruent, but parallel, right? Because 68 plus 22 is what? 90. 35 plus 55 is 90. So if I redrew this picture without the stuff that we don't need, here's my picture, redrawn. And this is A, B, C, D. And this is 90. And this is 90. We have two segments that are perpendicular to the same segment. So we can say that segment AB is, what did we decide? Parallel to segment CD. These two are parallel. They're both perpendicular to the same line, so they're parallel to each other. So we didn't need any of these. The only reason we needed these crossing lines is because they gave us these angles. But we added the angles together and figured out those are both 90-degree angles. These are both perpendicular to the same segment, so they have to be parallel to each other. Questions there? Okay. One more example. All right, so for this one, we're going to call this line A. This line B, guys, stop throwing stuff, please. D and C. All right, and we want to know what do we know? What can we figure out? So let's ignore this part up here for now. Let's just ignore this little crossing. I have line A and line B, both perpendicular to line D. So what does that tell us? They're parallel. A is parallel to B because they're perpendicular to the same line. All right, now let's ignore this piece and look at these two. Line C and line D are both perpendicular to line B. So what does that tell you about line C and D? They're parallel. C is parallel to D. So we have two sets of parallel lines here. So that's how we would use this information, looking at a figure, looking at a problem. All right, questions there? Okay. Homework.